A mega dungeon isn't just a really big dungeon. It's a campaign that breathes.
That is, yeah.
Oh.
That right there is the entire philosophy, isn't it? If you've ever, sat down and drawn this massive, sprawling map, 6 levels deep, hundreds of rooms.
Oh, I have.
And then you watch your campaign just completely fizzle out by the time the players hit level 5 or 6, you know that pain. It's a very specific kind of DM pain.
Absolutely.
And
I ran one myself a few years back. I mean, I spent weeks on it. Weeks, detailing every single monster, every treasure hoard, every trapped corridor. On graph paper, it was this masterpiece of interconnected geometry.
Right.
But in play, it just felt inert. The party would descend, they'd clear a sector, and that section was just gone permanently, cleared. It just collapsed into this this linear combat gauntlet, a really long checklist of rooms, and we all just ran out of steam. It felt dead.
And that static nature, that's the common dungeon problem. The sources we've been digging into, they explain exactly why that longevity fails. The core insight is that to design a mega dungeon that genuinely lasts, and we're talking dozens of sessions, an entire character arc from start to finish, it needs a profound shift in how you think.
Okay.
You have to move away from adventure writing, which is, it's a sprint, right? It's a short, intense burst of design. And you have to embrace world building, which is a marathon. It's all about sustainability.
So we're not just writing the sequence of events, we're growing the ecology.
Precisely. That's the perfect way to put it. The goal is to design an environment that functions as a reactive living system. It has to be an ecosystem where factions clash, where resources are desperately finite, and where the environment itself acts as a kind of strategic antagonist.
An antagonist, I like that.
Yeah, because if the dungeon doesn't react to the player's choices when they enter, or even more critically, when they leave, it's not a world. It's just a deep hole full of loot.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really figure out how to build this architecture of longevity. Our mission for this deep dive is to distill the principles that turn a massive static map into a dynamic, multi-month campaign. We need to focus on those core loops and the strategic design elements that keep players hooked on the exploration itself, not just the next fight.
Right. To sustain a campaign-length structure, you have to replace the default adventuring pattern that most players fall into, especially in, high magic systems like 5e.
Which is usually kick the door down, kill the biggest thing in the room, take its shiny loot, and then immediately go back to town for a magical reset. A long rest.
And that cycle breaks the mega dungeon instantly, because it removes all attrition. The core loop for a proper deep dive has to be centered on logistics and resource scarcity. The cycle is simple, but it's brutal. You enter the dark, you risk your limited resources, and we have to emphasize, limited to, gain crucial information or valuable treasure.
And then the most important part.
And most importantly, knowing when and how to execute a successful retreat back to safety. If you break any part of that cycle, the whole campaign just collapses.
This immediately brings us to that famous problem that plagues deep dungeons, right? The 5-minute adventuring day. In a game like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, if the party can just declare, okay, we take a long rest now, blow all their highest level spells in one fight, heal back to full, and reset every ability.
All the tension just evaporates instantly. The dungeon, no matter how hostile it is, just becomes a sequence of isolated bubbles of action.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating here is how the sources emphasize this. The environment has to be designed not just to be difficult on the way in, but just as difficult, if not more so, on the way out. The mega dungeon has to actively punish complacency.
So it's not enough to just survive the fight.
No. If the players are burning healing potions and their best spell slots just to survive getting to the objective, they must have calculated whether they have enough left in the tank to survive the return trip, past all those active threats they bypassed on the way in.
So the entire framing of a challenge shifts completely. Instead of the tactical question being, can we beat this monster right now? The strategic question becomes, okay, if we beat this monster, do we have enough hit points, enough torches, and enough spell slots left to make it back past that goblin patrol, across the collapsing bridge, and avoid that acid trap we didn't disarm 3 corridors back?
Exactly. Every single decision carries weight. And this reinforces the concept that knowledge is the only true, high-value, persistent resource. Gold is great, magic items are important, but they often lead to what you could call a loot plateau, where another +1 sword doesn't fundamentally change the challenge.
Right.
But a map showing the enemy patrol route, or a hidden key to a shortcut, or the true name of the demonic threat on level 4. That information scales with the players regardless of their combat level.
It's essentially the ultimate currency.
Yes, exactly, because you can't lose knowledge in a fight, and you don't use it up. It provides leverage. And that means retreating isn't failure, it's an extraction mission. Successfully returning to the surface with a detailed map of a new, unexplored sector or vital intel on a boss's weakness that should feel just as rewarding and victorious as actually slaying the monster. It's a win condition based on information gathering.
This means the whole mindset of the players in a mega dungeon needs to shift from focusing on pure combat stats to smart logistics and planning. You need to value the rogue who's drawing an accurate map and tracking resources just as much as the fighter who just rushes ahead.
And that shift from a tactical skirmish to a strategic resource management game, that is the foundational architecture of longevity. If your players are incentivized to conserve, to plan, and to retreat intelligently, the campaign will sustain itself across dozens of sessions because the stakes feel real and the environment feels like it's responding to their long-term choices.
Okay, so that brings us to the physical structure of the dungeon itself. You mentioned that one of the most common and campaign-killing mistakes is visualizing the dungeon as just a vertical ladder. Level 1 leads directly to a smaller level 2, which leads to level 3, and so on.
Yeah, it's a very long, narrow tunnel, and it inherently railroads the players.
The moment they clear that first layer, they feel like they have to descend, which means they're constantly in new, high-danger territory. They never actually gain mastery over their environment.
Precisely. The sources we looked at argue so strongly for prioritizing horizontal branching early on. The first level, level 1, it needs to be an absolute sprawl. Just massive. It has to create a wide, shallow end pool of territory that can sustain weeks, if not months, of play before the party ever feels compelled, or even safe enough to commit to going deeper.
But why is that initial sideways depth so vital? I mean, beyond just having more rooms to explore, what does it actually do for the game?
It's all about building mastery and, crucially, player attachment. If the players are constantly descending into new, unfamiliar territory, the dungeon always feels disposable, just another level to clear. But if level 1 is enormous, and it contains diverse biomes, different faction territories, multiple sublevels like crypts or prisons or forgotten maintenance tunnels, the party starts to feel like they're conquering territory.
Okay.
They learn the routes, they memorize the weak spots, and they feel a sense of ownership over that domain. This lateral expansion lets low-level parties explore multiple types of danger and political risks safely before they embark on that really high-stakes journey downward.
So this is where those specific map concepts come in. We need architectural designs that actually force lateral movement and choice, not just a straight line down.
Yes, these are the structural techniques that break that linearity. Take the spokes and hubs design, for example. Imagine a central, relatively safe zone, maybe a ruined courtyard or an old guard barracks, that radiates outwards through distinct hallways. Each one leads to a different biome. The fungal caves, the collapsed mines, the old temple ruins. This inherently offers choice and specialization right from the start.
Or the ring road. I love this one. It's this massive circular corridor that wraps around the entire level. It allows the party to completely bypass a roadblock or flank a large enemy force or commit to a long, resource-intensive detour rather than a direct, bloody confrontation. The ring road always gives them a second strategic option.
I'm also a huge fan of the concept of mirrored wings. You design two major sectors with identical layouts, say, two administrative complexes on either side of a main river, but you give them vastly different inhabitants or environmental states. One wing might be patrolled by silent, efficient clockwork constructs, while the mirrored wing is a fetid, overgrown fungal infestation. The player's memory of the geometry is rewarded, but their tactical approach has to change completely.
And crucially, we need social buffers, which I know we'll get into more later, but architecturally that translates into faction corridors. These are large, controlled pathways, maybe through goblin territory or occultists' tunnels, that act as a sort of negotiated highway. You either pay the toll, or you sneak through during their shift change, or you commit to fighting your way through the truly hostile spider lair next door. It's a resource management choice, not just a combat one.
And you have to add that visual depth right at the start. The sunken atrium is a fantastic technique for this. This is a massive, multi-tiered vertical room, a ruined auditorium or a collapsed cavern that visually connects level 1, level 2, and maybe even level 3. It tantalizes the party with glimpses of deeper, stronger threats, but they can't access them yet. They see the glow of the deep forge or hear the distant sound of an underground river long before they can actually reach it.
That's classic tempting the players. And then finally, there's the structural idea of soft gates via rumors. The passage to level 2 might be technically open, the door isn't locked, But terrified NPCs or some cryptic graffiti on the walls warn the players away with stories of a sleeping horror or an incurable disease until they're much stronger.
It's an open door, but the risk is so high that it functions as a barrier while still preserving player agency. It ensures the player is the one making the choice to commit to the deeps, not the map forcing them down.
Okay, so we've established this need for an enormous horizontal sprawl. But here is the major logistical pain point for any multi-session campaign. If the players retreat to safety, rest, resupply, and then come back, they have to traverse dozens of cleared, empty rooms just to get back to the front lines of the adventure. That commute becomes so tedious, and it absolutely kills the fun. So we need to engineer earning convenience through shortcut engineering.
You're so right. If you punish smart logistical retreats with a boring, hours-long grind through cleared territory, players will just stop retreating. They'll start pushing until death, and you get a TPK. Shortcuts, on the other hand, they turn backtracking into a tangible victory lap. They demonstrate the player's impact on the megastructure, a permanent, hard-earned change that makes their future lives easier.
So what are some concrete, practical examples of these earned shortcuts, things that permanently change the environment?
The sources have some fantastic mechanical examples. The winch elevator, for instance. It's initially broken, but the parts you need to repair it are scattered across level 1 and level 2. Once it's fixed, that elevator allows for rapid transport of heavy loot, injured allies, or unconscious NPCs right back to the surface. It's a major multi-session investment that pays off enormously in safety and loot extraction.
That's permanent quality of life improvement. That's a real reward.
Or you could take the arcane route, the teleport circle. Maybe the circle is there, but it's dormant. Finding the missing sigil sequence in an ancient wizard's journal, or securing the proper focus crystal from a deep-level vault, unlocks instant travel to a specific safe room or even the surface. But, and this is critical, this convenience has to come with a cost.
Right.
Perhaps the circle is unstable and alerts arcane predators every time it's activated, or it requires rare material components for each use.
Agency with consequences. Absolutely vital. I love the idea of the one-way shoot. It gives you immediate fast travel downward, which is great when you're rushing an objective, but it fully commits the party to the deeps. There's no easy return until they find a completely different way out. It's a high-stakes, dramatic shortcut.
And don't forget the social shortcuts, like the Beast Gate. The party might not repair a mechanism, but instead they befriend or bribe or broker a deal with a controlling faction, like those kobold miners we mentioned, to open up their territory to the party. This instantly turns a potentially hostile, time-consuming combat zone into a neutral travel highway. It's a diplomatic victory that acts as a permanent physical shortcut.
So vertical progression isn't just about going down a ladder or gaining levels. It's about how quickly and safely you can move between the levels you've already explored. It's about how many ropes, bridges, and lifts you've installed along the way.
Precisely. And now, to make those vertical layers distinct and memorable, we need to introduce what the sources call dungeon identity by era, not difficulty. Instead of level 10 just being a harder version of level 1 with bigger monsters, you design the layers based on their history or their function.
How does designing by history stop the dungeon from feeling like, generic stone corridor number 5?
It allows the architecture itself to tell the story of a forgotten world. One level could be the pristine, high magic ruins of a fallen empire. The level below that might be the rough-hewn, flooded mines that were excavated by the orcs who came after. And below that, a new infestation of bioluminescent fungi and scavengers. You use distinct elements for that environmental storytelling.
Can you give us some more expanded examples of those distinct elements? How does the era actually define the challenge?
Right. Well, think about architectural materials. The high magic level uses smooth, seamless obsidian and enchanted stone, implying powerful shielding and magical wards. The mine level uses rough-hewn rock and unstable timber supports, which means the risk of cave-ins and structural collapse is a constant threat. The infestation level is dominated by slick, organic hive resin, which might require different movement checks or be flammable. The materials themselves define the obstacles.
And the lighting technology becomes part of the atmosphere and the risk, too.
Totally. In the ancient tombs, you might find eternal magical flames that never extinguish, offering safety and clear sight. But in the fungal zone, you're relying entirely on bioluminescent moss, which creates this soft, obscuring light that favors stealthy monsters. In a ruined military base, you might only find rusted, defunct electric lamps, forcing the players to rely solely on their own finite light sources.
And even the trap design tells a story about that layer's era.
The ancient high magic layer features complex magical glyphs and illusion traps that require arcane knowledge to bypass. The Fallen Empire era might have these intricate mechanical clockwork saws or pressure plate traps. In contrast, the more recent Goblin occupation layer uses crude, spiked pit traps and simple tripwires. This approach naturally mixes up the danger levels too. You might find a dormant, high-level, ancient golem on level 1 because it's ancient, not necessarily low-level, while weak scavengers are down on level 10, picking apart valuable components. Depth no longer equals a guaranteed danger level.
And finally, as players commit to going deeper, we need to leverage vertical combat. The geography itself should change the physics of the fight.
Combat has to stop being just 2 dimensions of movement. We should be thinking 3-dimensionally. This means things like rope bridge battles over massive, deadly voids, where a single failed saving throw means a 1,000-foot fall.
Terrifying.
Or defending a moving winch elevator from flying enemies as it ascends. Or using multi-tiered mezzanines in that sunken atrium we talked about, allowing archers and spellcasters to target the party from 3 levels up or down.
And those high-stakes dangers, like collapsing catwalks that give way under the heavy armor of the party's tank, forcing the whole group into this tactical retreat while they're literally hanging on for dear life. A single vertical shaft can host 5 unique, highly memorable encounters, making the travel just as dangerous as the exploration. Okay, so we structured the world. Now let's integrate the mechanics that actually maintain that tension. We need to apply this sort of OSR tension to the inherently heroic framework of 5e without requiring the DM to rewrite the entire rulebook.
The principles are pretty clear. You focus strictly on time, noise, light, and the meaningful risk of attrition. This shifts the core of the game from being a series of tactical skirmishes to being a strategic resource war, where the environment itself is the primary antagonist slowly wearing the party down.
So we don't necessarily need harsher damage rules, we just need clearer, more punitive consequences for how players manage their time and their resources.
Exactly. And nothing embodies that resource war better than enforcing the torch economy as the clock. Resource management completely falls apart if players have infinite light and unlimited time to search every single room.
As a DM, I often struggle with how to track time strictly without constantly interrupting the game and killing the flow. How do the sources suggest we implement a functional time constraint?
You use the dungeon turn clock. It's a simple mechanical countdown. You advance a dungeon turn every 10 minutes of real-world exploration and searching, or after every single combat encounter. A standard torch burns out after 6 turns, which is roughly 1 hour of continuous exploring. This gives the players a literal visual countdown on their exploration time before the darkness and the dangers that lurk within it overtake them.
That makes light itself a finite tactical choice.
And the light has to introduce risk. Light as a risk changes the entire tactical decision-making process. For example, wind drafts in certain collapsed corridors or near ventilation shafts should instantly extinguish non-magical flames, plunging the party into total darkness. Or light-attracting predators, maybe things that hunt by heat signature or are blinded by darkness, they're drawn specifically to the flame, turning light from a safety net into a liability.
And there's the classic grim atmosphere point. Carrying a torch means enemies see the party long before the party sees them, which completely negates the element of surprise.
It flips the advantage of having a light source. And on top of that, you have to reinforce resource constraints through simple rules. Fuel weight has to matter. The party has to choose between carrying enough oil to sustain light for 2 days or carrying the heavy pile of loot they just found. That trade-off prevents them from just staying down there indefinitely. And you introduce environmental variables. Wet passages or heavy humidity can ruin torches, dampen lantern wicks, or damage their explosive components.
Which brings us to the moment the players try to break that attrition engine. Resting as a strategic risk. If players can just take a long rest in any cleared room, the mega dungeon loses all of its tension. Resting has to advance the dungeon's agenda, not stop it.
Resting must be framed as a strategic decision, not a magical reset button. The dungeon has to react. So what are the specific consequences? A short rest, even if the room is barricaded, it advances the turn clock, and it still requires at least 1 wandering monster check. An unsafe long rest, meaning any rest taken deep within hostile territory, that should result in an automatic planned ambush or interruption. The players think they're safe for 8 hours, but they wake up in the middle of combat.
But what about the powerful defensive magic that heroes often use? Specifically, the bane of every attrition-focused DM, Lumen's Tiny Hut. It's supposed to provide 8 hours of absolute impenetrable safety.
This is where the narrative response becomes crucial. The magical sanctuary is not safe from consequence, it's just safe from immediate damage. The dungeon's inhabitants are not stupid. They see a shimmering dome appear in the middle of their hallway. They will either set up a siege or trap right outside the dome while the party sleeps, or, and this is even better, they might seal the exit or redirect an internal flood while the party is inside. The party wakes up fully rested, but now they're facing a completely new, far more difficult logistical or diplomatic situation than when they went to sleep.
They wake up to a siege line of goblins who have set up ballistas, or to the realization that their only exit is now blocked by 10 tons of rubble. The problem wasn't the magical protection, it was the time they spent sitting there.
Exactly. The time spent resting is time the dungeon spends reacting.
Now let's talk rewards. If we want players to be strategic and risk-averse, we have to incentivize exploration over combat. If XP is exclusively given out for kills, then the dungeon just becomes a static extermination mission.
The reward structure is the steering wheel for player behavior. Instead of just awarding XP for kills, we have to reward intelligence. Award mapping milestones for completing and accurately documenting a sector. Reward discovering secret doors and passages because that proves observation skills. Make faction deals and successful diplomacy worth more XP than clearing 3 rooms of minions. And reward opening shortcuts because that's a permanent strategic victory for the party.
The classic gold for XP rule from OSR games is also incredibly effective here. You only gain experience when you successfully extract wealth from the dungeon and spend it outside. That means every single fight you take is a risk to the massive pile of gold you're carrying, forcing a hard choice between fighting everything to the death and surviving with your horde.
Which naturally leads to the idea of a meaningful retreat. If players feel like retreating is failure, they will push until death, and that results in TPKs. We have to reframe retreat as a necessary and often successful tactical decision. It's an extraction phase.
How do you mechanically reward the act of running away?
You can award escape XP for getting wounded allies out alive, especially if the party used clever tactics or engineering to do it. You can grant faction respect because the NPCs down there are genuinely impressed that the party survived the deep dark. And the tangible reward is that returning with map data or recovered relic fragments is a concrete win. It proves the raid was successful even if the main objective remains. Survival itself is the ultimate OSR reward that ensures the campaign can continue.
Finally, to prevent burnout from all this intense attrition, we need pacing. Constant, unyielding terrors just numbing after a while. We need to introduce fear cycling periods of intense pressure followed by valleys of relief.
Sustainable tension is a pacing skill. You need intentional downtime spots where the players can actually catch their breath and use their full abilities without immediate danger. These can be physical locations like neutral markets, these noisy, bright bazaars often run by powerful neutral entities where violence is culturally or even magically forbidden.
Or places of tranquility.
Exactly. Hidden gardens, these underground nature preserves with fresh, clean water and food, or even a mysterious hot spring or a truce hall. These locations let the players breathe, role-play, and plan their next deep venture before they have to climb the next peak of terror. They're crucial for mental and character health during a long campaign.
So if we've done our job right, the party is now interacting with the dungeon strategically. But we need to ensure that anti-stagnation engine is running constantly. The dungeon can't be a static museum of monsters just waiting to be hit. It has to react to player choices through migration, repopulation, vengeance, and changing hazards.
Right. We need systems in place so that players aren't just clearing content. Their actions have to create measurable shockwaves. If they wipe out the dominant goblin tribe on level 1, the rival giant spiders from level 2 should immediately move up to claim that newly vacant prime territory.
That requires a hybrid approach to room design, keyed plus fluid encounters.
Exactly. Keyed rooms are the fixed and iconic ones. These are your major set pieces. The wizard's library, the boss's throne room, the central altar. Their function, their structure, their general layout, that remains constant throughout the campaign. Fluid encounters are the vast majority of the surrounding spaces that can change occupants and tactics over time.
So the map stays true for geography, but it's never reliable for safety or population density.
Precisely. In a guard post, the furniture, the barricades, the fortifications, those all remain constant. That's keyed. But the faction manning it, their alertness level, and their specific tactical deployment, that changes over time. That's fluid. A storage room always has crates and barrels, keyed, but the contents, are they full or looted? And the specific scavengers hiding inside are fluid. This preserves the memorable set pieces while keeping continuous exploration uncertain and demanding constant vigilance.
Let's expand on those dungeon weather systems. These are internal, repeating cycles that affect the entire complex, and they force a kind of timing strategy outside of just combat.
These events force players to either adapt or wait. For instance, magical surges. For 100D4 hours, once a week, wild magic effects might trigger with every spell cast, or all magical traps reset and become incredibly sensitive. Or perhaps curse tides, where necrotic energies ebb and flow, making all undead in the area heal 5 HP per round, or forcing necrotic damage saving throws every hour in certain zones.
That's a huge mechanical impediment. It forces players to either use non-necrotic damage sources or just bypass the area entirely until that tide recedes. It's a built-in timer.
You could also have fungal blooms, where spores spread and obscure vision, reducing visibility down to 5 feet. That dramatically changes combat range and favored tactics for a few hours. Or silent cycles, maybe from a ritual or some geological event where verbal spell components fail, but it's the perfect time to sneak past heavily guarded areas using stealth.
And the physical hazards like tremors or flooding.
Flooding is an excellent one. Water levels rise 2 feet, making some of the lower levels submerged, difficult terrain, and it ruins non-magical torches. Players have to strategize. Do we wait for the water to recede, or do we commit resources like water breathing to proceed immediately? This elevates environmental strategy to the same level as combat strategy.
And this all culminates in the most powerful concept of all, power vacuums. When players wipe out a dominant faction, they create consequences that prevent them from just clearing content.
The sources are very clear on this. Player victories must create new problems. The ecosystem response should be violent. Rival faction expansion is immediate. The neighboring faction moves into the cleared territory, fortifies it, and often expands its patrol routes. Or the leaderless minions might start a civil war, turning a formerly organized combat zone into a chaotic mess of fighting sub-factions.
And the unintended consequences are always the most memorable.
Absolutely. Maybe the dead boss was actively guarding a critical seal. The sealed deeper threat awakens because the party eliminated the only thing holding it back. Or perhaps a new group takes over a critical choke point and implements a new toll regime that charges double the price for passage, or worse, demands tribute in blood.
The dungeon is playing back. The goal is for players to realize they aren't just adventurers cleaning up a mess, they are powerful agents of geopolitical change, and the dungeon is the environment reacting to that change by reshuffling its challenges.
And if the dynamic environment is the anti-stagnation engine, then factions are the primary content engine for long-term social engagement. They transform the dungeon into a complex web of interests where alliances, trade, and entities are formed.
Right, we have to move past the simple assumption that every creature down there is just waiting to kill the party on sight. That makes the world feel so flat.
You must design factions that prefer leverage over violence. Their goal is self-preservation or trade or recruitment or extortion. Think about the toll collectors who only want gold or food or fresh water for safe passage across a dangerous bridge. Or the smugglers who want discretion and cleared pathways, valuing a quiet transaction over a fight to the death.
Or the cult recruiters, who are less interested in fighting and more interested in the party joining them, may be offering temporary buffs or crucial information in exchange for listening to their sermons or performing some non-combat ritual. Diplomacy provides massive replayability because a faction relationship can evolve and shift over the entire campaign, unlike a single combat encounter that's over in 10 minutes.
And critically, you need asymmetric faction knowledge. This is the key to turning social interaction into a vital pathfinding tool. Each major faction holds a unique piece of critical information that the players must acquire to progress safely. Knowledge is currency here too, and it's probably more valuable than gold.
So the players must swallow their pride and talk to the Rat King or the Goblin Merchant, because those entities hold the key to the next zone. Give us some detailed examples of that crucial asymmetrical knowledge trade.
Okay, so the kobold miners, who spend their lives tunneling, they know the location of all the gas vents, the structural weak points, and the hidden emergency tunnels that bypass 3 levels. They might trade a map of the ventilation shafts for fresh mining tools and some hard liquor. The Lost Mages know the logic and the sigil sequences behind the teleportation circles, and they'll trade access to a fast travel circle for specific, rare magic components they can't get themselves.
Meanwhile, the Cult of Silence knows the true name of the demon on level 4, the secret name that grants massive power or leverage over that specific monster. But to get it, the players might have to retrieve a relic the cult desires, forcing a dangerous non-combat retrieval mission. This negotiation-first approach keeps the players engaged in a totally different way.
Exactly. Players start seeking out factions not to fight them, but to learn how to survive the next descent. It transforms the experience from a hack and slash into a political and social sandbox.
And for the ultimate level of investment and ownership, we have to allow for player-created factions.
This is where the players leave a permanent mark on this deep world, allowing them to found their own cults or safe houses or trade routes. It shifts the campaign into territory control and politics.
Like establishing a safe room network, a chain of fortified, stocked rooms that only the party and their trusted allies know about. Or running a black market to sell dungeon loot to the other monsters who can't reach the surface market.
When players invest their gold and their time building something inside the dungeon, they stop treating it like a disposable level. They start defending it like it's their home. They might open a toll road, securing a dangerous main route, and then charging other NPCs or minor factions to use it safely. The investment, the risk of having to defend it, and the massive sense of ownership ensures long-term engagement far past level 20.
We've covered the entire architecture of longevity, from the core loop of survival and attrition to the geopolitical engine of factions. But let's be honest, running a campaign of this massive scale sounds like a nightmare for the dungeon master. How does one manage this complexity without just losing their mind?
You need a centralized organizational tool. It's often called the Campaign Bible or the Titan Scale template. This tracks the macro logistics while you, the DM, can focus only on the micro tactics of the immediate session. You simply cannot run a multi-year campaign based on loose scraps of paper.
The template forces you to define the fundamentals up front, right? Like establishing the separation between the hook and the truth. The public rumor might be a simple hook, it's a tomb filled with gold. But the deep truth is the overarching reality. It's actually a biomechanical engine keeping the sun alive, and it's currently failing due to internal sabotage. That separation is crucial. Information gained from the deep truth scales way better than gold does.
And you have to plan your connectivity matrix from the start, defining your levels by era and mapping out the explicit shortcuts and connections. For example, level 1-3 is the upper ruins with the newly repaired winch elevator. Level 5-7 is the ancient foundry with the maglev train you hope to fix. And level 11-13 is the gravity well controlled by an elder brain. You map the movement and the convenience paths first.
And finally, managing the dynamic world requires that while you were gone, checklist, a quick set of checks you perform every time the party takes a long rest or returns to the surface.
That checklist forces the world to react. You check for any power vacuums in areas the players cleared. You run the repopulation cycle, maybe bringing in 10% of new mobs or scavengers to cleared territory. And you shift the dungeon weather systems to ensure the environment is never exactly the same as when they left it. This is the ultimate anti-solution.
So if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, the goal is to systematically avoid the common mistakes that immediately sink these campaigns. You have to avoid the linear gauntlet by forcing horizontal choice. You have to stop the rest spam by making time dangerous. You counter the backtrack grind by engineering those critical shortcuts. And you prevent the static world by ensuring everything changes when the players step away.
So what does this all mean for the DM planning their next epic endeavor?
The core philosophy is this. A campaign-length mega-dungeon survives by staying alive. It cannot be solved or cleared like a traditional video game level. It has to shift routes, repopulate threats, and evolve based on player actions. The game rewards memory, planning, negotiation, and logistics just as much as it rewards combat skill.
The dungeon must be an adversary that learns, that reacts, and that remembers every single time you return. That distinction, the idea that the dungeon has a memory, is what turns a long hole in the ground into an entire engrossing campaign.
We want to give a massive shout out to the sources we drew from today, including the excellent work from LitRPG Reads and Paul Bello for meticulously outlining these principles for long-term dungeon design.
And as you think about the next time you drop a party down a deep, dark hole, consider the concepts we've explored today. What's the deepest dungeon you've ever run? And what was it that made it feel alive instead of endless?
We'll see you in the next deep dive.